It was a chilly Monday morning when the elevator doors slid open on the top floor of Crestlane Technologies. A tall woman stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she made her way toward the boardroom. She carried herself with confidence, shoulders back, head high. But there was something about her that set her apart from the usual crowd in this corporate fortress. Maybe it was the quiet determination in her eyes or the fact that she didn't look like anyone else who had ever walked those halls. Her name wasn't important yet, not to the people waiting inside the boardroom. All they knew was that some new face had been appointed as interim CEO after the previous one got fired for running the company into the ground. Rumors were flying around like wildfire. Was she hired because no one else wanted the job? Or maybe she was just another token hire, someone brought in to make the company look good on paper without expecting much from her. Whatever the case, nobody took her seriously. When she pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the boardroom, all heads turned. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then came the laughter. It started with a snicker from one corner of the table, then grew louder as others joined in. Some laughed openly, while others tried to cover their amusement with coughs or fake smiles. They weren't even subtle about it. One guy leaned over to whisper something to his neighbor, and both burst out laughing like school kids. The woman stood at the front of the room, unfazed. She placed her leather folder neatly on the table and scanned the room with steady eyes. There were 10 executives sitting around the polished oak table, all dressed in expensive suits, all looking smug and self-assured. These were the same people who had let the company spiral out of control, but here they were acting like royalty. Not a single one of them seemed worried about what might happen next. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, and commanding all at once. "Good morning," she said. "I'm your new CEO." Instead of stopping the laughter, her words only made it worse. Someone muttered under their breath, "This is gonna be fun." Another rolled their eyes dramatically. Clearly, they thought this whole situation was a joke, but the woman didn't flinch. She pulled out a chair at the head of the table, sat down, and opened her folder. Inside were pages filled with numbers, charts, and notes she'd prepared during weeks of late-night research. "I know you're curious about why I'm here," she continued, ignoring the chuckles still rippling through the room, "and I'll get to that. But first, let me tell you what I've learned so far." She clicked a button on the remote in her hand, and the screen behind her lit up with a graph showing the company's financial performance over the past 5 years. The numbers were ugly, red ink everywhere. For a second, the laughter died down. You could see the unease creeping onto their faces as they realized she wasn't bluffing. This wasn't going to be a quick meeting where they patted her on the back and sent her on her way. No, she meant business, and she wasn't afraid to dig deep. She pointed to specific sections of the graph, explaining how certain decisions had led to massive losses. "See this dip right here?" she asked, tapping the screen with the laser pointer. "That's when your marketing budget doubled overnight for no apparent reason. And over here," she moved the pointer to another section, "this is where funds disappeared from R&D without explanation." By now, the room was dead silent. Even the guy who had whispered jokes earlier was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open. None of them expected her to come in armed with facts. Most CEOs took months to settle in, relying on reports handed to them by assistants. But she had done her homework. She had studied every detail, uncovered every flaw, and now she was laying it all out for them to see. Still, she wasn't done. After finishing her presentation, she closed the folder and looked each executive in the eye. "You laughed when I walked in," she said, her tone softening but firm. "But I want you to think about something. If this company fails, and trust me, it's closer to failure than any of you realize, what will you do then? Will you laugh when you lose your jobs? When your reputations are ruined? When shareholders demand answers?" No one said a word. The air in the room felt thick, almost suffocating. Finally, she added, "I'm not here to entertain you, I'm here to fix this mess. And if you're not ready to work with me, then we're going to have a problem." With that, she stood up, gathered her things, and left the room. Behind her, the executive sat frozen, unsure of what had just hit them. What they didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The next few days at Crestline Technologies were unlike anything the company had ever seen. The woman who had walked into the boardroom and faced their laughter wasn't just talking tough. She was acting on it. Every morning she arrived early, her leather folder in hand, ready to dig deeper into the mess that had been festering for years. She didn't waste time with small talk or unnecessary pleasantries. Instead, she moved like a storm, tearing through layers of secrecy and incompetence that had kept the company afloat only by sheer luck. Her first order of business was to meet with department heads one-on-one. These weren't casual chats over coffee. They were intense, no-nonsense discussions where she demanded answers. Most of the managers were caught off guard. They weren't used to being questioned so directly, especially not by someone who seemed determined to uncover every skeleton hiding in the closet. Some tried to dodge her questions, offering vague responses or blaming others. But she wasn't having any of it. "You're responsible for your team," she told one manager during a particularly heated meeting. "If something goes wrong under your watch, don't point fingers, fix it." Her tone left no room for argument. By the end of the conversation, the manager looked pale, visibly shaken by her unwavering focus. As she worked her way through the company, patterns started to emerge. It wasn't just one department struggling. It was everyone. Sales teams were inflating numbers to hit targets they knew were impossible. Marketing budgets were being spent recklessly, often without clear goals or measurable outcomes. And then, there was finance, the heart of the problem. Money was disappearing faster than anyone cared to admit, siphoned away into projects that never materialized or accounts that couldn't be traced. She hired an independent auditing firm to dig into the financial records. Within days, the auditors uncovered discrepancies that made her blood boil. Billions of dollars, yes, billions, had gone missing over the past decade. Contracts worth millions had been awarded to shell companies with no real operations. Bonuses had been handed out like candy to executives who hadn't earned them, and worst of all, employees lower down the ladder were being squeezed dry, forced to work overtime without pay while those at the top lined their pockets. When she finally called another board meeting to share her findings, the atmosphere was tense. Gone were the smirks and snickers from before. This time the executives shuffled into the room quietly, avoiding eye contact with each other. They knew what was coming, and none of them wanted to face it. She stood at the front of the room, clicking through slides on the projector screen. Each slide told a story more damning than the last. One showed how the company's debt had skyrocketed year after year, despite promises of growth and stability. Another highlighted the staggering number of lawsuits filed against Crestline, lawsuits that had been settled quietly behind closed doors to avoid bad press. And then came the slide that silenced the room completely. A list of names, dates, and amounts detailing embezzlement schemes stretching back nearly a decade. "This isn't speculation," she said, turning to face the group. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "This is fact. These are your decisions, your actions, or in some cases your deliberate inaction, that have brought us here. Do you understand what I'm saying? This company is on the verge of collapse because of you." For a moment, nobody spoke. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Finally, one executive cleared his throat and tried to defend himself. "Look, we've had challenges, sure. But this kind of language is unfair. We've always done our best to keep things running smoothly." "Smoothly?" she shot back, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what you call losing billions of dollars? Is that what you call lying to shareholders and employees alike? Because if that's your definition of smooth, I'd hate to see chaos." The room erupted into murmurs as the executives exchanged nervous glances. Some looked angry, others embarrassed, but none dared to challenge her further. She had backed them into a corner, and they knew it. Still, she wasn't finished. "I want to make something very clear," she continued, pacing slowly in front of the table. "I didn't come here to play games. I didn't come here to sit back and let this company crumble while you protect your egos. If we're going to fix this, and I mean really fix it, you need to start telling the truth. All of it. No excuses, no lies, just honesty." Her gaze swept across the room, landing on each person individually, Some met her eyes briefly before looking away. Others stared at the table, unable to hold her stare. For the first time, they realized she wasn't bluffing. She wasn't afraid to burn the whole place to the ground if it meant rooting out the corruption. Before dismissing them, she gave one final warning. Change starts now. If you can't handle that, leave. I won't stop you. But if you stay, you'll do things my way, from this moment forward. As the executives filed out of the room, their faces painted with a mix of fear and disbelief, she remained seated at the head of the table. She leaned back in her chair, letting out a long breath. This was only the beginning of a long, hard battle. But deep down, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could turn this sinking ship around. The days following the explosive board meeting felt like a storm brewing. The woman at the helm of Crestline Technologies knew she had shaken things up, but shaking wasn't enough. She needed to see who would stand with her and who would crumble under pressure. It was time to test their loyalty, not just to her but to the company itself. Her first move was bold and unexpected. She froze all major projects across the organization. Construction plans for a new office building? Paused. Launches of flashy marketing campaigns? On hold. Even contracts that had been signed weeks ago were put under review. No one could touch a dollar or make a decision without her approval. At first, people panicked. Managers scrambled to find answers for their teams. Employees whispered nervously in hallways, wondering if they still had jobs. But freezing projects wasn't just about control. It was about uncovering the truth. Every department was ordered to submit detailed reports on what they'd been working on, how much money had been spent, and whether those efforts had actually moved the needle for the company. Some departments complied quickly, eager to prove their worth. Others dragged their feet, hoping she'd forget about them. They underestimated her persistence. Then came the audits. Teams of forensic accountants arrived unannounced, combing through files, emails, and financial records. Desks were searched, computers analyzed, and receipts scrutinized. For many employees, it felt like an invasion. But for her, it was necessary. She couldn't rebuild the company without knowing exactly where the cracks ran deepest. As the investigations unfolded, she noticed something interesting. While some executives tried to distance themselves from the chaos, others stepped up. 1. Senior manager voluntarily handed over documents showing how his team had been pressured to falsify performance metrics. Another admitted to approving inflated budgets because he feared losing his job if he pushed back. These confessions weren't easy for them. They carried the weight of guilt, but they showed a willingness to change. And that mattered more than anything. Still, not everyone was ready to cooperate. There were holdouts, people who thought they could ride out the storm by staying quiet or playing dumb. That's when she made her next big move. She opened the floor to the rest of the company. In an email sent to every employee, she announced a new initiative. Anyone could anonymously report unethical behavior or operational failures without fear of retaliation. All they had to do was send their concerns to a secure inbox monitored by an independent ethics committee. At first, responses trickled in slowly. People were hesitant, unsure if this was just another empty promise. But as word spread that action was being taken based on these reports, the floodgates opened. Emails poured in, detailing everything from minor rule-breaking to massive cover-ups. One whistleblower revealed that the CFO had been funneling millions into offshore accounts for years. Another exposed how the COO had manipulated quarterly earnings reports to secure bonuses. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of how deeply rooted the corruption was. With each new piece of evidence, she confronted the guilty parties head-on. When the CFO was called into her office, he stammered and denied everything, at first. But when she slid a folder across the desk containing bank statements and transaction records, his face went pale. "You don't have to admit anything," she told him coldly. "The numbers speak for themselves." He resigned later that day, along with several other high-ranking officials implicated in the scandals. Those who refused to step down were fired on the spot. Word traveled fast through the company. No one was untouchable anymore, but removing bad actors was only half the battle. She also needed to replace them with leaders who shared her vision for a better, more ethical Crestline. To do this, she turned to the people who had proven themselves trustworthy during the upheaval, the ones who had spoken up, cooperated fully, or shown integrity even when it was hard. Promotions started rolling out, surprising many longtime employees who had been overlooked in favor of connections or charisma in the past. One such promotion went to a mid-level manager who had spent years quietly advocating for fair treatment of junior staff. He was given oversight of human resources, tasked with creating policies that prioritize transparency and fairness. Another went to a young analyst whose data-driven approach had helped uncover discrepancies in supply chain spending. She was put in charge of procurement, ensuring that future contracts were awarded based on merit, not favoritism. These changes didn't go unnoticed. Employees began to feel a shift in the company culture. For so long, they had worked in an environment where speaking up meant risking your career. Now they saw that honesty was rewarded, and accountability was expected at every level. Morale improved almost overnight. Conversations in break rooms shifted from complaints about unfair practices to ideas for improving processes. People started believing again, not just in the company but in themselves. Of course, not everyone was happy about the changes. Some resented the new leadership, grumbling that the old guard had known how to get things done. Others worried that the focus on ethics would slow growth or hurt profits. But she addressed these concerns directly in town hall meetings, explaining that doing the right thing wouldn't come at the expense of success. It would lead to sustainable success. "We can't build a future on lies," she told the crowd during one such meeting. "If we want to thrive, we need to earn trust from our customers, our partners, and most importantly, each other." By the end of the month, the transformation was undeniable. Crestline Technologies wasn't perfect yet, far from it. But for the first time in years, there was hope. Hope that the company could rise from the ashes of its own making. Hope that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. And hope that maybe, just maybe, the woman who had walked into that boardroom and faced their laughter might actually pull off the impossible. The air in the boardroom was heavy, almost suffocating. It wasn't like the last few meetings where people whispered nervously or shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This time it felt different, final. Every executive sitting around the table knew they were there for one reason: to face her ultimatum. There would be no more delays, no more excuses. Today, they would either step up and commit to change or walk away forever. She walked in carrying a thick folder, its edges worn from constant use. Her presence commanded attention, but this time no one dared laugh or smirk. She took her seat at the head of the table, placed the folder down with a soft thud, and looked each person in the eye. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just let the silence sit there, stretching longer than anyone expected. The tension was unbearable. Finally, she spoke. "I've given you all plenty of chances," she began, her voice calm but firm. "I've shown you the truth about what's been happening here. I've cleaned up messes you left behind, and I've begged you to work with me to fix this company. But now we're out of time." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then she leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. "Here's how this is going to go. You have two choices. Choice number one: you cooperate fully with my investigation. That means handing over every document, answering every question honestly, and accepting responsibility for your actions. If you choose this path, we'll rebuild this company together from the ground up. We'll create something ethical, sustainable, and successful." Her gaze swept across the room, locking onto each person as she continued. "Choice number two is simple. If you can't or won't cooperate, then I will shut Crestline Technologies down, permanently. No golden parachutes, no severance packages, nothing. Just the end of this company and everything you've built here." The room went completely still. Even the faint hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade into the background. Some executives stared at her in disbelief, as if they couldn't believe she'd actually follow through on such a threat. Others exchanged uneasy glances, silently weighing their options. A few sat frozen, their faces pale and expressionless. One man finally broke the silence. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "You can't be serious, shutting down the company? Do you have any idea what that would mean? For everyone?" He gestured vaguely toward the window, as if referring to the hundreds of employees working below them. "I'm dead serious," she replied without hesitation. "Do you have any idea what keeping this company alive means if we don't fix the rot inside it? If we keep operating the way we have been, Crestline won't survive another year. The lawsuits will pile up. Shareholders will abandon us. Customers will lose trust. And eventually the whole thing will collapse anyway. At least this way I know I tried to save it." Her words hit hard. The reality of the situation was undeniable. Crestline was hanging by a thread, and she was the only one holding it together. Without her, the fall would be catastrophic. Another executive chimed in, his tone defensive. "But shutting it down? That's extreme. Isn't there another option? Something less drastic?" She shook her head slowly. "No, there isn't. This isn't about finding a middle ground or making compromises. This is about doing what's right, even if it's painful. If you're not willing to do the work to make this company better, then I won't waste another second trying to convince you. I'll walk away and Crestline will go with me." For several long minutes no one said a word. The weight of her ultimatum hung in the air, pressing down on everyone in the room. They had always assumed they were untouchable, that their positions were secure no matter what happened. But now they realized just how wrong they'd been. She wasn't bluffing. She wouldn't hesitate to pull the plug if she had to. Eventually, one of the older executives cleared his throat. "All right," he said quietly, his voice tinged with resignation. "If this is really the only way forward, then I'm in. I'll cooperate, whatever you need." His admission seemed to break the dam. One by one, others reluctantly agreed to play along. Some sounded sincere, others clearly hoped to protect themselves by pretending to comply. But she didn't care about their motives, not yet. What mattered was that they had made a choice. For now, that was enough. Not everyone stayed, though. Two executives outright refused to cooperate. When she asked them directly if they were willing to accept her terms, they shook their heads. "I didn't sign up for this," one muttered, standing abruptly and storming out of the room. The other followed close behind, muttering under his breath about how ridiculous the whole situation was. As the door slammed shut behind them, she turned back to the remaining group. "Good riddance," she said simply. Then, addressing the rest of the room, she added, "To those of you who are staying, understand this isn't a free pass. You're here because you chose to be. But if I find out later that you're holding back information or trying to sabotage this process, I won't hesitate to remove you too. Are we clear?" Heads nodded quickly, some more eagerly than others. She could see the fear in their eyes, but also a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they believed deep down that she could actually turn things around. With that, the meeting ended. As the executives filed out of the room, she stayed behind, staring at the empty chairs. It had been a long, exhausting day, but she felt a small sense of relief. The hardest part was over. Or so she thought. Now came the real challenge, proving to everyone, including herself, that Crestline could rise from the ashes. She gathered her folder and stood up, taking one last look at the boardroom. It had once been a symbol of power and corruption, but now it felt like a battleground where the war for integrity had just begun. With a deep breath, she walked out, ready to take the next step. The real work began after the ultimatum. It wasn't glamorous or easy. It was messy, hard, and often thankless. But she didn't shy away from it. She rolled up her sleeves, ready to dig into the trenches alongside everyone else. For Crestline, technologies to survive, it needed more than just a fresh coat of paint. It needed a complete overhaul, a transformation that would touch every corner of the company. Her first step was cutting out the excess. Over the years, Crestline had become bloated with unnecessary expenses, luxury offices, extravagant retreats, and inflated salaries for executives who contributed little value. She made the tough calls no one else had dared to make. The top B floor executive suites were repurposed into meeting rooms for teams who actually produced results. Company cars and private jets were sold off. Lavish bonuses? Gone. Every penny saved was redirected toward projects that mattered: innovation, employee training, and customer satisfaction. At first, there was pushback. Some employees grumbled about losing perks they'd come to expect. A few even threatened to quit. But she addressed their concerns directly in town hall meetings, explaining why these changes were necessary. "We've been living beyond our means," she told them bluntly. "And when we spend money on things that don't add value, we're stealing from the future of this company, and from you." Her honesty resonated with many. People started seeing the bigger picture. They realized that the glitz and glamour hadn't made Crestline successful. They'd masked its failures. Slowly but surely, attitudes shifted. Employees began taking pride in the new direction, knowing they were part of something meaningful. Next came the people, the heart of any organization. She knew that rebuilding trust meant giving employees a voice. For too long, they'd been treated as cogs in a machine, expected to follow orders without question. Now she wanted them to feel valued and heard. She launched an initiative called Open Door Fridays, where anyone could walk into her office or send an email if they preferred, and share their thoughts, ideas, or concerns. At first, only a handful of brave souls took her up on the offer. But as word spread that she genuinely listened and acted on what she heard, more people stepped forward. One suggestion came from a junior engineer who had been with the company for less than a year. He proposed streamlining the product development process by creating cross-functional teams that included members from design, engineering, and marketing. It sounded simple, but it worked wonders. Projects that used to drag on for months were completed in weeks. Morale soared as employees saw their contributions making a real impact. She also tackled diversity head-on. Crestline's leadership had always been overwhelmingly male and white, leaving countless talented individuals overlooked because of bias. She partnered with community organizations to create internship programs aimed at bringing in young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. She hired recruiters specifically tasked with finding diverse candidates for open positions, and she introduced mandatory training sessions on unconscious bias, ensuring that everyone understood the importance of inclusion, not just as a moral imperative, but as a business strategy. These efforts weren't without challenges. Some longtime employees resisted the changes, accusing her of favoritism or reverse discrimination. Others worried that focusing on diversity would dilute the company's standards. But she stood firm, reminding everyone that innovation thrived when different perspectives came together. "If we want to stay ahead," she said during a heated debate, "we need to stop thinking the same way we always have. Fresh ideas come from fresh voices." As the months passed, the culture at Crestline began to shift. Gone were the days of fear and silence. In their place was a spirit of collaboration and accountability. Teams worked together seamlessly, sharing credit instead of competing for it. Mistakes were acknowledged openly, not swept under the rug. Employees felt empowered to take risks, knowing they wouldn't be punished for trying something new, even if it failed. But outside pressures loomed. Large, shareholders grew restless, demanding faster results. Competitors seized opportunities to poach clients, claiming Crestline was too distracted by internal drama to deliver quality service. Skeptics in the media questioned whether the company could truly recover under her leadership. Each challenge tested her resolve, forcing her to remind herself why she had taken the job in the first place. Late nights became the norm. She spent hours reviewing reports, attending meetings, and strategizing with her team. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering that maybe she had bitten off more than she could chew. But then she'd remember the faces of the employees who believed in her, the ones who had stuck around despite the chaos. Their hope fueled her determination to keep going. One evening, as she sat alone in her office flipping through feedback surveys from employees, she came across a note that brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you for believing in us," it read. "For the first time, I feel like my work matters." That single sentence reminded her of what was at stake. Not just profits or market share, but people's lives. Behind every number on a spreadsheet was a person with dreams and ambitions. If she succeeded, she wouldn't just save a company, she'd change lives. By the end of the second year, the turnaround was undeniable. Financial reports showed steady growth for the first time in nearly a decade. Customer satisfaction ratings soared as products improved and services became more reliable. Employees reported higher levels of engagement and loyalty. Even shareholders, once skeptical, began praising her leadership. Still, she knew the journey wasn't over. Building a better company wasn't a destination. It was a continuous process. But for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel a sense of pride. Crestline wasn't perfect, but it was alive again. And that was worth fighting for. 2 years had passed since the day she walked into that boardroom, met with laughter and doubt. Now, standing on stage in front of a packed auditorium filled with investors, employees, and industry leaders, she felt a wave of emotions wash over. Her pride, relief, but most of all gratitude. The journey hadn't been easy, but every sleepless night, every tough decision, every moment of self-doubt had led to this. The room buzzed with energy as she stepped up to the podium. Gone were the smirks and whispers that once greeted her. Instead, applause erupted before she even said a word. She smiled softly, raising a hand to quiet the crowd. When the noise settled, she took a deep breath and began to speak. "When I first came here," she said, her voice steady but warm, "I didn't know if we could make it. This company was broken, not just financially, but at its core. People didn't trust each other. Decisions were made out of greed, not purpose. And honestly, no one believed we could turn things around, including some of you." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, easing the tension. She paused, letting the moment sink in. Then her tone shifted, becoming more serious. "But today I stand before you not because I'm perfect, or because I have all the answers. I'm here because we did something extraordinary together. We chose to do the hard work, to rebuild this company not just for profit, but for people." She clicked a button on the remote in her hand, and the screen behind her lit up with numbers and graphs. These weren't the same depressing charts she'd shown during her early days at Crestline. This time, they told a story of growth, resilience, and triumph. Revenue had increased by 40%. Employee retention rates were at an all-time high. Customer satisfaction scores soared above industry standards. Investors who had once threatened to pull out were now clamoring to be part of the company's success. "These numbers don't exist in a vacuum," she continued, pointing to the screen. "They represent something bigger. They represent late nights spent brainstorming solutions. They represent teams coming together to solve problems instead of blaming each other. They represent the courage it takes to admit when you're wrong, and the strength it takes to keep going anyway." As she spoke, she noticed familiar faces in the crowd, employees who had stuck by her side through the toughest times. There was the young analyst whose data-driven approach had uncovered hidden inefficiencies, the mid-level manager who had advocated tirelessly for fair treatment of junior staff. Even the skeptics who had doubted her at first were now nodding along, their expressions softening with pride. "But let me be clear," she added, leaning forward slightly. "This isn't my victory. It's yours. Every single person in this room played a role in getting us here. From the janitorial staff keeping our offices clean to the engineers designing groundbreaking products, you all matter. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Her words resonated deeply. For so long, employees had felt invisible, treated as replaceable parts of a machine. Now, they knew their contributions mattered. Their efforts weren't just acknowledged, they were celebrated. After sharing the company's achievements, she turned to the future. "We've come a long way, but this is only the beginning. The world is changing faster than ever, and if we want to stay ahead, we can't rest on our laurels. We need to keep innovating, keep listening, and keep pushing boundaries. But more importantly, we need to stay true to who we are. A company that values integrity over shortcuts, people over profits, and progress over stagnation." She paused, scanning the room one last time. Her eyes lingered on a group of interns, sitting near the back. They looked nervous yet excited, eager to prove themselves. She thought about how far Crestline had come and how much further it could go with fresh minds leading the charge. "Before I finish," she said, her voice softer, "now I want to leave you with this. When I started, I wasn't sure anyone would believe in me. I faced ridicule, resistance, and moments where I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But what kept me going was knowing that change is possible, even when it feels impossible. If we hold on to that belief, if we refuse to settle for less than we deserve, we can achieve anything." The room erupted into applause again, louder this time. People stood clapping and cheering as she stepped away from the podium. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others hugged colleagues seated nearby. The atmosphere was electric, charged with hope and possibility. Backstage after the event, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Sitting alone in a quiet corner, she thought about everything she'd overcome. The laughter in the boardroom, the scandals she'd uncovered, the battles she'd fought. They all seemed like distant memories now. What remained was a sense of fulfillment, knowing she had left a mark not just on Crestline but on the lives of everyone involved. Her phone buzzed with notifications, texts, emails, social media posts praising her leadership. One message stood out. It was from an employee she barely recognized, someone who worked in customer support. "Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like," it read. "You've changed my life." She smiled, feeling a lump rise in her throat. That simple sentence summed up why she had done it all. Saving Crestline wasn't about proving herself or silencing critics. It was about creating a better future for the people who gave their best to the company every day. As she packed up her things and prepared to leave, she glanced back at the stage one last time. The spotlight still glowed faintly, casting a golden hue across the empty podium. She thought about the legacy she hoped to leave behind, not one of power or wealth, but of integrity and humanity. And with that, she walked out, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because she knew, no matter what happened next, Crestline, Technologies, and the people who made it great would endure.